Hey folks, picture this: a curly-haired 20-year-old riding his horse as if he were riding destiny itself. He has just taken the throne, and the first thing he declares is that he wants to conquer the entire world. Not because anyone provoked him, not because he was starving for land, but simply because staying at home was too boring. This was not some lunatic. This was Alexander the Great, the man who turned maps into toys, turned war into the art of seduction, and turned himself into the very first living meme in human history. But what was hidden behind that blazing halo of glory? A tyrant father, a mother who whispered to snakes, a moody horse, and a crew of best friends who could not stop bickering even while invading Asia. This is not a history textbook. This is an epic tragedy staged by the gods themselves and by the over-the-top personality of a young man who never learned how to stop. Before we dive into this whirlwind tale that stretches across time, if you enjoy history, told in a sarcastic, thrilling, and just a little bit outrageous way, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below to let me know where you are listening from. Because honestly, it is kind of magical that all of us, from across the world, are gathered here to hear the story of a Greek kid who once dreamed of turning the entire earth into his personal playground. Alexander may have died more than 2,000 years ago, but his story, insane, touching, and terrifying all at once, still bewilders the world to this very day. He was not a king. He was a phenomenon. And you are about to be swept into that storm. Get ready, because Alexander is about to ride straight into your ears. If you were 20 years old, handsome with a king as your father and a snake-whispering sorceress as your mother, what would you do? Go to college, launch a startup, or saddle up a horse and set out to conquer the world? Alexander chose option number 3. And no, this is not a joke. This is a true story about a young man who looked at the map of the ancient world the way you might look at a restaurant menu, pointed at one country after another, and said, I want this one, and that one, and save that for dessert. Welcome to Alexander the Great, the restless guy who refused to sit still, who did not know how to stop, and whose every move was like swiping right on history, leaving all of humanity wondering what on earth is wrong with this guy. Born in the palace of Macedonia, Alexander was not an ordinary child. While you were still learning to crawl, he was studying philosophy with Aristotle. While you were stacking Lego bricks, he was learning how to kill with a spear. And while you were just beginning to notice girls, Alexander was barehandedly taming a wild horse. He rode Bucephalus, a beast thought to be untamable. Yet a 12-year-old boy, after only a few minutes of watching the light and whispering a few words, turned it into his personal steed. Step aside, How to Train Your Dragon. This was How to Ride Your Murder Horse, the live-action version. Here was the problem: Alexander was not just good. He knew he was good. And worse, he knew the world was far too small for his ego. From the very start, he had been trained to think big, as if you had just finished a game of Risk and decided to play it in real life. With his father, Philip II, a legendary general, and his mother, Olympias, who often whispered to snake gods, Alexander grew up in a household where not wanting to lose to your dad became a full-scale global military campaign. Every childhood story about him sounds like an over-the-top movie trailer. One fine day, Persian envoys arrived at the palace, only to find a cold-faced, curly-haired boy playing with a sword. They sneered. He looked them dead in the eye and said, "You come from the lands I will conquer in the future. 10 points for prophecy, no Nostradamus required." Alexander was not born to rule. He was born to see how far he could go before he died. And when Philip was assassinated, in a tragedy of wine betrayal and a plot straight out of House of the Dragon, that 20-year-old boy took the throne. most people in his position would weep draft policies and stabilize the kingdom. Alexander, he gathered his army, called up his best friends, and kicked off a 12-year gap year with no days off. But this was not old-school conquest. Slash plunder and build golden statues of yourself. Alexander had another game in mind. He invented something we might now call war influencer marketing. Everywhere he went, he renamed cities, married princesses, planted his culture, and left a message behind. Follow me for more wars. This was not just military victory. This was personal branding at an imperial scale, and the audience was hooked. The Egyptians called him Pharaoh. The Persians called him King of Kings. The Greeks called him the divine guy who laughs. Everyone knew he was breaking the rules of the game, but no one was fast enough to stop him. The question is, did he go this far out of passion, or because he simply could not stop? How could a young man who had everything, power, intelligence, weapons, followers, keep pushing forward as if possessed? Maybe because he understood one truth, that few dare to face everything that stops will eventually die. And he chose not to die. Until one day. No. Wait. Not yet. That part comes later. For now, look back at the beginning. A boy leading his horse, crowned with bronze, carrying in his eyes the reflection of the entire world. Not to admire it, to own it, not to rule it, to make sure it would remember his name. Alexander the Great, the only man who ever turned geography into his personal diary. And you, the audience, are still only on the first page. If Alexander was the atomic bomb, then Philip II was the detonator. A man who was king, strategist, and toxic dad, all rolled into one with an achievement record that could make any child feel useless straight out of the womb. Philip II was not the kind of father who buys his kid an iPad and says, "Do your best in school, son." He was the kind of father who built a professional army, invented the phalanx formation that crushed everything in its path, and then turned to his child and said, "Now beat that." History remembers him as the man who united the Greek city-states. To Alexander, he was the enormous shadow that pressed on his childhood, like a test no one ever wanted to retake. And then there was his mother, Olympias. Beautiful, powerful, brilliant, and a little serpentine. Not snake in the high school drama queen way. She literally kept snakes as pets. She even claimed that she had been possessed by Zeus himself. No, not metaphorically. Literally, I conceived Alexander from a bolt of divine lightning. In modern terms, your dad is the CEO of Uber. Your mom is a famous witch on TikTok. And the family expectation is that you should be walking on the moon before you turn 30. Pressure. Call it brain melting. Alexander's childhood had no cartoons and no toys. He studied philosophy with Aristotle, trained with weapons before puberty, and listened to bedtime stories drawn from the Iliad and the Odyssey, where heroes slayed dragons and stabbed gods. No wonder Alexander grew up thinking that taking a break meant conquering Egypt for fun. The relationship between Alexander and Philip reads like a complicated family novel, admiration, rivalry, and the occasional desire to kill each other, literally. Philip went through 7 wives, maybe 8, depending on the source. And at one banquet, drunk on wine, he declared in front of everyone, "May my new wife give me a son worthy of the throne." Alexander stood up, raised his cup, and shot back. "So what am I, a trial version?" They fought. Alexander stormed out. His mother left with him. Royal drama back then did not need Netflix. If Athens caught wind of it all, of Greece had gossip for a week. But for all the anger, Alexander learned 2 lessons from Philip. First, it is not enough to be a king. You must be a king who fights. Second, no enemy is more dangerous than a foolish ally. These were lessons Alexander carried to his grave. And like a Greek tragedy, directed by a curly-haired Shakespeare, Philip's end came in spectacular fashion. Assassinated during his daughter's wedding by a former lover-turned bodyguard. The reason Philip had discarded him after marrying again. Gay drama plus assassination plus power politics. HBO could not have written it better. Philip's death was the beginning of Alexander's legend. Not because he mourned, but because he was finally free of his father's shadow. Many suspected Olympias or Alexander himself had a hand in the plot. No proof, plenty of motive, and absolutely no denial. With the throne still stained with blood, Alexander ascended at 20 years old. Young but not naive, he crushed all opposition. He handled politics like a ninja dispatching enemies in the dark. Then he took step one, keep his father's army and use it to conquer the rest of the world. In other words, Alexander did not just inherit the crown. He inherited his father's unfinished dream. The dream of Greece not as a country, but as an empire. And he was going to make it happen. But bigger, bolder, and far more personal. Alexander never forgave mediocrity, because he knew he could not afford to be remembered only as the son of Philip. He had to be the answer to a single question. If Philip was a strategic genius, what would happen if you added mythology speed and no brakes? And so after the funeral, after the coup, after a few heads rolled, Alexander tightened the reins of Bucephalus, the loyal horse who had carried him since boyhood, and looked east, where the sun rose, where kingdoms had never heard his name, where the map was still blank. Let's ride. Before he became the man who rode on the back of the entire world, Alexander first had to learn how to ride something close, a temperamental, stubborn horse, with a habit of kicking anyone foolish enough to approach. Bucephalus, the name alone sounded fierce, was not the kind of horse you take for a stroll in the park. He was a weapon with fur as fast as the wind nerves strung tighter than a bowstring, and an ego as high as Zeus himself. When Bucephalus was first brought to the Macedonian court, everyone was excited. A gift from Thessaly worth more than gold, sculpted in muscle like an Olympic athlete. The only problem, he hated everyone. No one could ride him. No one could even touch him. And when Philip II watched his generals tossed around like bowling pins, he shook his head and muttered, "This horse is more useful boiled for dinner than ridden into battle." Then a voice spoke up. "Let me try." It was Alexander, only 12 years old. The entire court erupted in laughter. A boy still wet behind the ears trying to mount this beast comedy show of the year. Alexander did not laugh. He walked slowly toward the horse. No hands extended, no sudden moves. His eyes fixed on the light. Bucephalus thrashed, pulled at the reins, screamed into the air. And yet, something shifted. Alexander had noticed what no soldier, no general, not even Philip the Conqueror of every battlefield had seen. The horse was not crazy. It was terrified of its own shadow. Yeah, it sounds like a poetic movie line. But it was true. Bucephalus was no fool. He was smart enough to panic at the sight of his shadow on the ground. All it took was turning him toward the sun, and the fury melted away. Alexander whispered softly, reached out, and then, with a sudden leap, vaulted onto the horse's back as if music had started with no introduction. The arena froze. No one could believe their eyes. The child they had mocked was now riding the beast they feared more than demons. And he was not just riding, he was flying. Wind roared. The mane whipped in the air. The earth thundered. The scene belonged to legend. Within moments, Alexander and Bucephalus were one. Boy and horse, wild and tamed warrior, and living weapon. When he returned, Alexander dismounted, brushed off his hands, and looked at his father. "I just want one horse. No one else is to have him." Philip, stunned, wept. Perhaps the only time he cried without victory. He embraced his son and declared, "My boy, find a kingdom worthy of you. Macedonia is too small." Boom, one of the most legendary lines in Greek history. And also a prophecy, a curse. From that day on, Alexander knew he was not born to stay in one place. He was born to ride Bucephalus and to chase the world. Bucephalus was not just a horse. He was the symbol of Alexander himself. Stubborn, untamed, unrideable except by one. And once loyal, willing to follow you into hell. From Greece to India, from deserts to snowfields, Bucephalus was always at Alexander's side. Among thousands of soldiers and hundreds of war horses, only one was given a name, only one was buried in marble, and only one had an entire city built in its memory. That city was Bucephala, a living monument that declared to the world this horse was not a mount. He was my friend, my weapon, my legend. And why does this detail matter? Because when people tell the story of Alexander, they talk about victories, fame, empire. But few remember that his great journey began not with an army, but with a stubborn horse and a boy brave enough to step forward when everyone else walked away. Bucephalus was Alexander's first lesson that true leadership does not come from force, but from seeing what others cannot see, believing what others laugh at, and taming it not with the whip, but with the mind. Alexander was not a breaker of rules. He was the one who rewrote the definition of possible, starting with a horse no one else could ride. And that was exactly how he would ride the world. If you ever thought philosophy was just for robed old men drawing circles on a chalkboard, you are right. But also wrong. Because once upon a time, there was a curly-haired rich kid who did not study philosophy to pass exams. He studied it to conquer the world. His name was Alexander, and his teacher Aristotle, the father of logic, the influencer of ancient Greece, a man who could turn the most boring concept into a high-caliber intellectual weapon. The story began when Philip II, king of Macedonia, decided that his son, the boy who rode horses as if he were riding the cosmos, needed some proper education. But not from some random school. Philip hired Aristotle himself, the #1 mentor of the age, a full-stack mind, who covered everything from biology to rhetoric, complete with the deluxe in-house tutoring package. Aristotle took the job. He not only taught Alexander, but also gathered a whole rich kid squad of noble youths to join the class. Think of it like a gifted program today, except the students wore armor and debated how to govern entire populations. There were no whiteboards or PowerPoint slides. There were trees, hills, lakes. Every lesson was a walking seminar. One moment discussing metaphysics, the next kicking through tall grass in search of snakes. In an age with no internet, Alexander downloaded knowledge straight from Aristotle like plugging a USB into his brain. They explored everything from Plato's philosophy to biology, from ethics to the nature of power. But unlike your average student, Alexander did not study to pass tests. He studied to apply, immediately. When Aristotle said, "A leader is the one who can manage the emotions of the crowd," Alexander noted, "Use this when convincing soldiers to march into Asia." When Aristotle explained willpower stands above instinct, Alexander thought, "Save that for crossing the Persian desert." Once Aristotle lectured that what separates humans from beasts is the ability to reason. Alexander replied, "So that means humans can be persuaded to kill each other for a reason." Pause. Aristotle looked at him, and for the first time in his career, the philosopher felt a shiver. This was not just a bright student. This was a student turning knowledge into ammunition. After a few years, Alexander graduated. No diploma, no ceremony, no applause. Just a quiet farewell to his teacher and an unspoken look. Now it is my turn to redefine truth. When he took the throne, he did not build a library. He built a war campaign. But in every move he made, the breath of Aristotle lingered, not as a teacher, but as the foundation of a mind sharp, analytical, and capable of playing the emotions of a crowd like a musical instrument. Proof. When the Greek city-states rebelled after Philip's death, Alexander did not charge in with swords. He talked. Straight up, I am the new king. I am not my father. I am the upgrade. And like someone trained in public relations at Harvard, he blended negotiation with threats sprinkled in a little flexing of past achievements. Within months, Greece obeyed like a well-fed cat. Some even volunteered for his grand campaign. From the heir to a bloody throne, Alexander became the leader of a Greek alliance. Of course, alliance here meant join us or be crushed. Now it was time to march. Alexander led 40,000 men across Asia Minor into the Persian Empire, at the time the biggest empire on earth. King Darius was busy enjoying grapes and spa treatments, unaware that a 20-year-old with curly hair was riding toward him like a storm. And here is what you need to understand. Alexander was not just a warrior. He was a director. Every battle was a production, with structure, with twists, with clear roles. And on that stage, he always cast himself as the lead. The first act, the Battle of the Granicus. The Persians had the numbers, the terrain, the defensive advantage. But Alexander did not fight like a normal general. He personally led his cavalry across the river, struck straight at the weak point in the enemy line, created chaos, and then dragged and dropped the Greek phalanx right into the Persian heart. Result, the Persians collapsed. Alexander triumphed, and he made sure to free all the Greek prisoners previously captured by Persia. A masterclass in boosting reputation. A hero does not just win battles, he builds his personal brand. Rumor had it that on the nights before battle, Alexander never slept. Not because he was worried, but because he was scripting. Who would volunteer? Who would hold the rear? Who would accidentally catch sight of him mid-battle to retell the story later? He knew history is written by the survivors, but legend is crafted by those who understand the audience. And for Alexander, war was a stage. Philosophy was the script. Soldiers were the actors. And he was the director who knew he was born to steal the spotlight. The difference between a man who fights battles and a man who conquers the world is simple. The fighter stops when the battle ends. Alexander kept thinking about the next scene. If history were a dating app, Alexander would be the guy swiping like a maniac with only one criterion: if you have borders, I will cross them. Alexander's campaign was unlike any military operation before it. It was not just fight, conquer, and plant a flag. No. He conquered in what you might call Tinder premium-style swipe right on civilizations, match their cultures, drop off a city named after himself, and then ghost onto the next. After wrecking Anatolia, Alexander rode straight into Egypt, one of the oldest, proudest, and most stubborn civilizations in the world. King Darius of Persia still refused to believe that this curly-haired kid was an actual threat. But Egypt understood. They saw a young, handsome man riding like a god, fighting like a machine, and not burning temples, not slaughtering civilians, not crushing their culture. Instead, Alexander entered Egypt as if he had been there in a past life. He respected their religion, kept the local officials in power, and proclaimed himself the son of the god Ammon, a deity the Egyptians worshipped and conveniently similar to Zeus. The result, Egyptians fell for Alexander like fangirls at a K-pop concert. They crowned him pharaoh, carved his statues, and let him found a brand new city, Alexandria, right on the coast, destined to become home to the most legendary library in history. Subtle flex, I do not just wield swords. I build cities that read. This was conquest of a new kind. Win a war, then build, instead of burn, and then swipe again. Alexander turned toward Persia, vast, wealthy, and full of pride. Now Darius finally realized this was not some rebellious teenager. This was a tidal wave wrapped in world-class public relations. Darius panicked. He sent peace offers, promised to give Alexander half the empire plus a daughter's hand in marriage. Alexander laughed, then said, "Thanks, but I will take all of it. Swipe right. Reject the offer. March straight to Gaugamela, one of the most cinematic battles in ancient history." Darius showed up with over 200,000 men, scythed chariots, elephants, and a royal entourage dressed like it was Fashion Week. Alexander had 47,000, and a plan that felt like Christopher Nolan had written the script: feign weakness, lure the Persians into the center, then punch straight through to the very spot where Darius stood. Result: Persia collapsed. Darius fled. History recorded it as the most humiliating unmatch of all time. But Alexander did not just want victory, he wanted the hearts of the defeated. After Gaugamela, he did not loot or slaughter. He preserved Persia's political structure, even letting local nobles keep their seats. It was his way of saying, "I take the throne, but you still have jobs." Savage level high, emperor level master. And he went further. He married Darius's daughter Roxana, not just for love, though she was beautiful, but for strategy. It was political blood fusion, marry local royalty, produce mixed heirs, and create a new generation of leaders with Greek blood running through Persian veins. Swipe right, match, marry, merge, build another Alexandria next. By the end, Alexander had founded over 20 cities named Alexandria, stretching from the Middle East to Central Asia to India. If today you open a map and see Alexandria, congratulations, you are standing inside a flex from 2,300 years ago. Everywhere he went, he followed his personal 5F policy: fight if he had to, flirt if he could, flex with temples, statues, and schools, fuse, mixing blood culture and language, famous, making sure everyone remembered the name Alexander. If you think he was an egomaniac, you are right. But if you think he was just a butcher like Julius Caesar, you are wrong. He killed when he needed to, but his true goal was not blood. It was to carve his name forever into human history. And nothing leaves a deeper mark than turning your enemy into a fan. That is why Alexander was not only a general, he was a psychologist, a sociologist, and the founder of the world's first global franchise, Alexandria. Other conquerors fought and stopped. He fought, stayed, integrated, launched local development strategies, then moved on. If there had been an MBA back then, Alexander would have graduated with honors. No one understood the power of cultural matchmaking better than he did. And no one ever used war to flirt with an entire continent as artfully as he did. Tinder, just the beta version. Alexander, the founder. If you think conquering the world was just one man riding into the sunset alone, Alexander would laugh and tell you that is the way people sound after watching their first Marvel movie. His empire was not built on stone. It was built on a friend group. A friend group that was brilliant, dramatic, and constantly on the edge of tearing itself apart. Welcome to the ancient version of The Boys, where every close companion was a standout character. Some loyal to the grave, some backstabbers, and some rumored to be Alexander's actual crush. At the very center of this bloody bromance was Hephaestion, general, confidant, soulmate, and according to many sources, possibly his lover. They met as boys, studied together under Aristotle, rode horses together, killed together, ate together, slept in the same camps, and fought side by side for decades. If Alexander was the lightning bolt, Hephaestion was the lightning rod standing beside him. Quiet, intelligent, striking in that brooding kind of way, Hephaestion worked silently in the background, managing politics and logistics like some divine accountant no one ever noticed. People said Alexander trusted no one but himself and Hephaestion. Once in front of a crowd, Alexander looked at him and said, "He is me, but the better version." Pause. The air thickened. The soldiers began glancing at each other. History does not spell it out, but when an emperor flexes his power and openly calls another man me but better, that is no ordinary friendship anymore. The two became inseparable. Hephaestion was not just a lieutenant. He was Alexander's second brain. He commanded armies, negotiated deals, secured the empire's back doors. But more than that, he kept Alexander from losing himself. But here was the problem: no one likes the new favorite of the boss, especially when the boss could kill you for a sideways glance. Cassander, Ptolemy, Clitus, Craterus, each with their own egos, their own bonds with Alexander. They had fought together, nearly died together. But as the empire grew, as the blood thinned, everyone wanted a bigger slice of the enormous pie. Drama erupted over the smallest things. A general felt overlooked. Another envied Hephaestion's influence. Someone else thought Alexander was losing his Greek roots by marrying Persian women and forcing soldiers to learn foreign tongues. One night at a banquet, Clitus, the very man who had once saved Alexander's life, got drunk and shouted at him, "You are no true Greek. You are a half-breed lost to Persia." Alexander, also drunk, face red, like a statue of Ares, pulled his sword and stabbed Clitus to death in front of everyone. The hall went silent like a tomb. Alexander broke down afterward. He cradled Clitus's body, screaming in grief. But it was too late. The fracture in his brotherhood had widened into an earthquake. From that day, Alexander grew lonelier, more decisive, less willing to listen. He was no longer just a leader. He was a man who could not be challenged. And then came the greatest blow of all. Hephaestion died, not in battle, not in rebellion, but from a fever, maybe typhoid, maybe poison. Whatever it was, it stole the one person Alexander called the other half of my soul. He collapsed. For 7 days he did not eat, did not sleep, did not speak. He shaved his head, ordered a tomb as grand as a temple to Zeus, forced the entire empire into mourning as if Hephaestion were a god. For a king who never shed a tear over fallen soldiers, who walked past bodies as if they were steps in history, this grief was not performance. It was real. For the first and only time, Alexander's weakness was laid bare. Not for war, not for power, but for the loss of the one man who made him feel less alone. A few years later, Alexander himself died. At age 32, many historians believe he truly died the day Hephaestion did. The rest was just a body refusing to quit. And that was the real heart of the greatest empire of antiquity, not marble, not steel, but a circle of friends who once held the world, and then fractured beyond repair. Alexander won hundreds of battles, but his greatest defeat failing to keep the people who had walked with him since the beginning. Alexander the Great did not lose a single battle. He was never overthrown by rebellion. He was not assassinated. No arrow, no spear, no sword ever brought him down. He ran out of battery. Sounds like a joke, but it is not. After 12 relentless years of riding from Greece all the way to India, defeating every empire bold enough to appear on a map, expanding his territory so far that Google Maps would need to flip vertical just to fit it in, Alexander did not stop because someone forced him. He stopped because his body hit reset. And when a man who never learned to stop meets death, that becomes the final answer. Rewind a little. After the death of Hephaestion, the greatest bromance in ancient history, it was as if Alexander's soul had been ripped out. From a brilliant strategist, he became a restless ghost, his eyes hollow, his voice dim, his words shorter, his ambitions longer. He no longer fought to win. He fought because he did not know what else to do. Like a streamer who has already beaten every game but keeps going live because he fears ending the show. Alexander wanted to go where no one had ever gone. After India, maybe China. After that, perhaps the edge of the world itself. But his army was not a portable charger. They were exhausted, completely drained. They had crossed deserts, climbed snowy mountains, marched through jungles, waded through rivers, and now they were told to keep going, just because the boss wants to know. At the river Hyphasis, near today's border of India and Pakistan, the soldiers refused. They set up camp, planted their flags upside down, and staged a silent protest. No shouting, no threats, just sitting there staring at Alexander. For the first time, their eyes showed not fear, but fatigue. Alexander walked the camp. No one moved. He sat down, waited. 1 day, 2 days. Silence. On the 3rd day, he stood and said a line history has polished into diamond. If none of you will follow me, I will go alone. But he did not go. Because he knew this time it was not an enemy stopping him. It was reality. Alexander returned to Babylon, one of the greatest cities of its age, where he began planning his next world campaign. Yes, you heard that right. After conquering Asia, he still wanted more. His to-do list included invade Arabia, build larger harbors, construct ships for the open seas, explore lands no one had ever reached. Basically, Christopher Columbus plus Julius Caesar plus Elon Musk multiplied by 100. But then came the problem: Alexander got sick. At first it was a mild fever, then chills. Then he lost his voice. Then he could not leave his bed. Doctors of the time, mostly shamans with medical degrees translated from Apollo via Google, tried everything. Burning herbs, mud packs, prayers, all while watching the greatest king who had ridden through storms of arrows, now unable to open his eyes. The army gathered outside the palace. They did not believe it. They could not. A soldier asked, "Is Alexander dying?" A general replied, "He is preparing for his final battle." 1 day before his death, Alexander asked to be carried outside. He lay there motionless, watching thousands of soldiers pass by to say goodbye. No words, just eyes, and the heavy footsteps of men who once called him a god. Then he asked, "Who will succeed me?" They say he whispered, "To the strongest." Those words shattered the empire, because no one knew who the strongest was, and everyone thought it was themselves. Alexander died at 32. No heir, no clear will, no family gathered around him. Just a body embalmed, placed in a golden coffin, and fought over for centuries afterward. His remains never returned to Greece, never returned to Macedonia. They were placed in Egypt, in Alexandria, the city he named after himself. At the center of the world, he once believed he would never leave. The death of Alexander is an eternal lesson. The man who conquered everything was in the end conquered by his own heartbeat. He did not fall to war. He did not fall to enemies. He fell to one brutal truth: no one can outrun a mortal body. The world did not lose Alexander because he failed. It lost him because he never learned. how to stop. And perhaps if Hephaestion had lived, perhaps only that man could have made him stop. Alexander the Great died, but Alexander the Great did not disappear. In truth, he lived on like a meme that refuses to die. Not just because of his victories, but because his entire persona, his style, and his drama were so viral, they could have been a Netflix original. You think influencers are a Gen Z invention? Wrong. Alexander was the OG influencer, back when there was no Instagram, and yet he managed to make entire continents know his name, copy his hairstyle, and build cities just to tag him. His death marked the beginning of something humanity had never seen before: a social network built out of legends. No ruler after him has confused history quite like he did. His generals, the same brotherhood that fractured after his death, tore his empire apart like a pizza no one had the knife to cut. Ptolemy grabbed Alexander's corpse, ran to Egypt, crowned himself pharaoh, and launched a dynasty that lasted 300 years. Oh, and by the way, Ptolemy said we are burying him here. And so Alexandria, the city he had founded, became his tomb. A perfect circle. The founder buried inside his own headquarters. Cities named after him popped up everywhere: Egypt, Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India. Open a map, and it looked like spotting 50 Starbucks, except instead of coffee shops, they were all stamped with the name of one man. Chinese scholars of the Qin dynasty called him the Western King who shook the heavens. In Islam, he became Dhul Qarnayn, the two-horned one mentioned in the Quran as a ruler who traveled the world and built a wall against demons. Medieval Christians turned him into a fantasy hero who fought giants, fire-breathing dragons, and devils. Alexander was not just real. He was the first multiverse character of humanity. Every culture remixed him their own way. Like a viral clip edited with EDM tracks, meme overlays, and subtitles in 9 languages, until nobody could tell who the real Alexander even was. Some said he was the son of Zeus. Others swore he discovered the secret of immortality. Some believed he never died at all, that he was still wandering Asia waiting to return. Meanwhile, his body still missing. Sound familiar? Elvis, Tupac, Alexander, the holy trinity of dead but still trending. On the battlefield, Alexander set the standards: lead from the front. PR your victories. Build a personal brand in the middle of war. Leave a legacy with both sword and thought. Politically, he left behind what few ever achieved. A super empire not built on ethnicity, but on the idea of integration. A half-Greek, half-local system that made people both proud and slightly flexed upon. A hybrid generation of blood and culture like cocktails mixed with ambition. Culturally even wilder. Sculptors carved him until their hands gave out. Poets wrote of him until their brains bled. Followers built temples to him alongside the gods themselves. 2,000 years later, Napoleon stared at a map and said Alexander did it. Why not me? Julius Caesar broke down in tears in front of his statue and said, at his age, I have done nothing. Everyone wanted to be Alexander. No one could, because he possessed something no one else could replicate. The ability to turn the entire world into content. Alexander understood what modern marketers call storytelling. Every battle was a story. Every city a status update. Every march a post that echoed across centuries. And his story was simply too good to die with his flesh. Some say Alexander died young because he lived too fast. Others say he did not die. The world just had no space left for someone moving that far ahead. But one thing is certain: he made his name immortal. Not through gods, not through magic, but through the absolute belief that he was born to be remembered. So if you are watching this video, here in the 21st century, with Wi-Fi, TikTok podcasts, deepfakes, and an endless flood of content every single day, and you still know the name Alexander the Great, congratulations. You are part of the viral loop of the very first influencer in human history. Welcome to the land of the immortals, where legends are written in blood and yours is dripping out drop by drop. There is no trumpet, no dream. You wake up to pain, the only thing that still tells the truth in this entire campaign. A sharp jolt from your big toe. When you try to move, a feeling of detachment snaps, like someone just tore off a part of your body from beneath silently. You look down, the toenail, the one that once protected you from sandstone and the fire of the sun, now sits askew outside your toe, still stuck with a bit of crusty blood like dirty glue. It has no shape, no purpose. It is only there to remind you you are still alive. The morning air at the edge of the desert is not cold. It is sharp like metal, and every breath feels like swallowing a blade. The sand beneath your back is dry but wet. Wet from you. Sweat. Blood. Urine, maybe. Last night was a blur of gasping breaths, dry-throated screams, and the sudden collapse of a dying horse beside you. The man next to you did not wake up. You do not remember his name, but you remember the smell. The smell rising from his armor, a mix of rotting flesh and molten metal. He is lying on his side, eyes open, mouth agape, frozen in a question that will never be answered. Maybe it was why you do not ask why anymore. You only ask, how many toenails do I have left today? You force yourself up. Every movement pulls a small wave of pain, not explosive, not fierce, just persistent, silent, and very real. It feels like your body is leaking out bit by bit, retreating from the game 1 millimeter at a time. You used to be a man. Now you are a dried-out sack of meat being dragged forward because a man named Alexander wants to reach the end of the world. You once thought following him was glory, but now what is glory? Is it the fact that you can still stand? Is it that you have not been eaten by the vultures you hear chirping above? You glance toward the horizon. It is not a sunrise. It is a slash of fire tearing open the sky. The sun rises like a giant eye opening to look down at you, not with pity, but to see how much more you can take. You are thirsty. Your throat is so dry that when you swallow, it sounds like 2 pieces of burning cloth scraping together. At your hip, the water pouch is empty. You shake it. Nothing. But the motion reveals something else. Your right leg is swollen, badly. The skin is beginning to crack, and the worst part, it no longer hurts. That is what is truly terrifying. Because if a part of your body no longer hurts, it means it is already dead. And you still have to carry it. You are hauling a corpse that is still attached to you, footsteps in the distance. Not a whole unit, just a few people. Survivors or looters looking for water blades or leather straps. No one in Alexander's army can tell the difference anymore. You grip your dull knife, not to fight, but in case you have to choose between being skinned or eating yourself. But they pass you by. Good. No one wants to touch someone who looks like he died yesterday. You get to your feet. Mistake. Your vision goes dark. But you do not fall. Not because you are strong, but because you are used to losing consciousness and still moving. Your legs are 2 slabs of meat soaked in sweat, blood, pus, and ash. Your shoes are gone, just a few torn straps wrapped around your feet, fused into your flesh like scales. You take a step, just one. Every time your foot touches the ground, it is a negotiation with the gods. You do not pray anymore. You know the gods left when Alexander declared himself their son. Something moves on your shoulder. Not wind. You turn. A bug. Big. Black. Eyes shiny like mirrors. It crawls into your collar. You do not swat it away. You let it go. Maybe it knows the way out of here. You do not. You used to be a soldier. Now you are baggage. You are a number in an army marching toward hell without knowing why. And Alexander, he still leads. He still shouts beautiful words about conquest, about glory, about immortality. But you know this much: immortality has no smell. And you stink of dried blood, rotten nails, and dreams that died long ago. You keep walking. Not because there is hope, but because there is no other choice. You used to think the worst kind of breakfast was when your mother punished you by skipping it. But today, you finally understand what it means to not eat, in the most literal sense. There is no pan, no fire, not a single trace that humans ever knew how to cook. The only thing you have is a handful of raw barley flour, damp from last night fermented, and smelling like the armpit of a forgotten corpse left under the sun. You roll it into a lump, ready to shove it into your mouth, when you notice something crawling inside. A larva, white, soft. You laugh. Not because it is funny, but because there is no longer a reason to tell food apart from worms. You chew. The mushy grain mixes with the salty taste in your mouth. Maybe blood, maybe old dried saliva, maybe something else. You swallow like hurling a chunk of clay into an empty stomach. It lands like a rock, not making you any fuller, just reminding you that you used to know what being full felt like. A horn blares. Assembly. You stand, this time without dizziness. Your body has adapted to the lack of blood. The squad leader, a man from Pella who claims he once drank wine with Alexander, is shouting at the soldiers. He is not saying anything new. Just the same order repeated so many times it could rot your ears. Prepare to march. East, across the mountains. Those mountains. You heard about them 3 days ago. The Hindu Kush. It sounds like a curse wrapped in cold wind. They say there is snowstorms and cliffs, but no one ever talks about the most important thing: are there any survivors on the other side? You look around. No one speaks. Everyone quietly packs up, though there is really nothing left to pack. A ragged cloth, a dull knife, a few gnawed bones. The belongings of someone once declared part of the greatest army in human history. You see a soldier collapse while trying to put on his shoes. No one helps. No one looks. Death here is no longer an event. It is background noise. You line up. There is no order. No one is counting. The living, the dead, the unsure, all stand mixed together like ghosts driven by the same indifferent horn. Someone carries a leather pouch, heavy with what you guess is water. You do not ask. Not out of pride, but because you know, here asking for water is more dangerous than asking for death. You drag your feet. Your right leg, the one without feeling, is now something you pull along like the shadow of your past. Each step is a heartbeat of endurance. You divide your day into 2 parts. The first part, learning to walk without toenails. The second part, learning to die without permission to fall. The sun is now fully up. It does not just shine, it imposes. The heat does not come from above. It presses in from all 4 sides like a crematory furnace. The sand is not ground. It is a blade heated red. Every step feels like walking across melted silence. There is no shade, only your shadow, shrinking until it disappears, just like your faith. You hear a scream behind you. Someone collapsed. No one stops. The commander does not look back. The one who fell is luckier than you. At least he gets to rest. You start to think of home, but the images are no longer clear. Your mother's face, the old dog, a grilled fish dinner. All of it has turned into concepts, not memories. Memories are something you keep when you hope to live long enough to tell the story. But you only carry the idea of your worn-out knees. The army stops at midday, not to rest, but because there is a stream ahead. They say it is water. You approach. Your eyes sting. The smell of animal dung, the stench of rotting leather, human decay. It is the last waterhole left by a caravan of camels that died here 3 days ago. But it is still water. You kneel and slurp. Your tongue touches something soft, a human finger. You do not vomit. That phase is long past. You just spit it out and keep drinking. Because water, even corpse water, is the only thing keeping you from collapsing in front of your commander. Where is Alexander? No one knows. Maybe 3 days ahead, maybe gone. Rumors say he has crossed the mountains, leaving the army behind. Some say he married a local noble's daughter and now lives like a god. But that is all rumor. The truth is, you still have to keep going. No one asks why. Because even if you asked, no one would answer. There is only sand, only pain, and the steady breathing of people sleepwalking through a desert cracked with the veins of dead blood. You know someone will not wake up tomorrow. Maybe it will be you. Maybe the man walking on your left, whose name you never learned. You swallow another mouthful of dust and keep walking. This is not a march. This is a ritual of decay. You do not walk like a person anymore, but like a remnant, a drained shell of flesh pulled forward more by habit than by will. The foot with no toenail has become something you dare not look at. It is swollen, oozing, and reeks with a sweet, sharp scent like spoiled barbecue. Every time it touches the ground, the pulse in your temple throbs, not from pain, but from something inside you slowly breaking. You look to the horizon. There is no destination, no landmark, just a searing white that stabs your brain. Sunlight reflected off the rocks and sand so fiercely, you can no longer tell where you are or where you are going. Everything is blank, both ahead and behind. The wind picks up, but it is not cool. It is the wind of fire, the breath of a massive furnace, and you are what it is, roasting layer by layer. Your eyes squint, but no tears come. Your body has already run out of water for any emotion. A man beside you collapses. No scream. Just a soft thump like a leather pouch deflating. He does not fall hard. He no longer has the strength for that. He just crumples and stays there. Eyes open, arms spread. No one stops. No one says a word. The footsteps continue steady, because survival has no room for sentiment. You used to be a soldier. You once sharpened swords, adjusted armor, and shouted Alexander's name like calling to a god. Now you walk without armor, without a name. And if there is any god here, he is doing a very convincing job of staying silent. You see a black patch on the ground. Shade. From something. A rock or the corpse of some animal stiffened under the sun. You rush toward it. Not to rest, but because shade is the most luxurious idea you can imagine. You sit. The sand beneath you burns like coal, but at least it is not melting your eyes. Next to you, an older soldier, the one who once said he fought at Issus at Gaugamela, is shaving dead skin from his foot with a knife. Each flake that peels off, he flicks away like scraps of paper. He says nothing. He looks at nothing, as if any excess skin might stop him from moving forward. You do not speak. No one does. Here every word is a burden, Because if you open your mouth, you might remember there is still a person inside, and that only makes it hurt more. The horn blares again. The column moves. You get up. The pus in your foot makes your leg quiver for a beat, but you walk anyway. No one waits for anyone. Midday. The sun is not above you. It is inside your head, pounding, blazing, and whispering, still not enough. A soldier ahead begins laughing. It is not happy, not sad, not even mad. Just the sound of a mind slipping off its rails. He lifts his arms, calls to something in the sky, says his mother is flying. Then he runs, the wrong way toward the sun. No one calls him back. A man glances at you and smirks. At least he has a direction. You keep going. Sharp rocks slice into your rotting soles. You feel blood seeping, but you do not stop, because those who stop stay. Sometime later, or maybe a lifetime later, the march halts at a low mound of rocks. The commander orders a 30-minute rest, but no one lies down. Everyone stays standing, because if you lie down, you will not get back up. Someone unwraps a foot bandage. Underneath is a festering blackish sore swarming with flies. He pulls out a knife. You stop watching. But the sound of bone being scraped is clear enough. A man gnaws on a piece of bread. It is hard as stone. He dips it into his own urine to soften it, then chews slowly. You do not feel disgusted. You feel jealous. At least he has something to chew. You check your water pouch. Empty. You tilt your head back, hoping a drop might still be clinging to the seam. Nothing. But at least your throat gets a little wet, with the last traces of hope sliding into the void. Evening comes. The wind is stronger, but it brings no clouds. Only dust from corpses long dried out, scattered along the path of those who came before. You breathe it in. Each inhale is a dry cough like sawed wood, harsh, sharp, and useless. You see Alexander somewhere in the distance, or maybe just someone in a purple cloak riding a white horse. You want to shout, but your voice is gone. A comrade leans in and whispers, "Tomorrow we go up the mountain." You do not reply. You already know, and you do not care. You just want a new toenail, or one night without dreaming of eating yourself. You walk on. You start seeing two suns. One is in the sky, where it is supposed to be, and the other in the sand in your eyes, in your bones, where it never belonged. You do not know what came first, the fever or the visions, but you do know this. You have separated from the world, and no one bothers to pull you back. Your legs do not move anymore, not because they hurt. Pain is old news, but because they are no longer under your control. It feels like trying to ride a dead horse, just skin clinging to a saddle dragging across stones. You fall, not violently, not dramatically, just gravity winning again like it always does. Hot sand presses against your cheek. Your eyes stay open. You see flies, 3 of them, buzzing around your mouth, discussing something, maybe dinner. No one turns back. You hear footsteps fading, a steady sliding rhythm like a bad dream slipping away. You lie there, a nameless lump of flesh with no water, no final words, not even anyone to say them to. The fever comes like a flood. It does not slam into your head. It seeps in quietly, then lifts you like a puppet with its strings cut. You dream. No. You are not sure it is a dream, because when you wake up, it is still there. If you even woke up at all. In the haze, you see Alexander, or something like him, not clearly. A purple cloak shimmering like clotted blood, a face with no eyes. He says nothing, just extends a hand. His fingers are too long, curling like snakes. He points forward. You laugh in your head. because your foot is oozing pus. How are you supposed to keep going? But you try. You crawl, on your elbows, your back scraping over rocks. Every push brings a jolt in your gut, like your intestines are being pulled out wrapped around pebbles. You drag forward, not knowing why, not knowing where, but that shadow keeps beckoning. And you do not want to lie here with the flies. At one point you dream of your mother, the smell of her hair, her warm breath, a bowl of vegetable soup, a cloth dabbing sweat from your forehead. You smile, then realize the cloth is a shroud and the smell is of a half-burned corpse. You cough. Something shoots out of your throat. You do not know what. You do not look. Might be your guts. Might be a hallucination. But maybe everything is a hallucination now. The sun keeps shining. It does not shift. Time does not move. It is stuck just like you. You crawl to a patch of shade. Something big cast it. An animal. A camel, a horse. You cannot tell. You cannot see its head. It has been severed. Only the bloated torso remains stiff, surrounded by a black curtain of flies like a funeral tent. You slip beneath it, into the shade. The stench is thick like a sealed grave, but it is the first place in hours where you are not being roasted alive. You sit, lean against the carcass, close your eyes. For the first time today, you see nothing at all. You dream again, but this time it is not gentle. You see yourself at the bottom of a dry well, hands bound, mouth open, throat cracked. Someone is pouring sand over your head, handful by handful. Each handful is a name you once knew, a person who once lived, a person who once died beside you. One by one, they bury you. You jolt awake. Cold sweat down your back. No, not sweat. Urine. You have wet yourself. For what time this week you cannot remember. You do not feel shame anymore. You look around. No one. No army. No trace. Just sandstone and the corpse beside you, now leaking from the gut. You wonder, am I dead? No one answers. No angels. No hell. Just the wind carrying a question. Does anyone still remember your name? You stand up. Not because of hope, but because staying down any longer will make you melt into the sand like the carcass beside you. You look around, pick a random direction, start dragging yourself. The fever is still there. You still see Alexander up ahead, or your mother, or yourself, the version of you that could still laugh. You do not care who it is anymore. You just need something to follow so you do not have to look at your own feet. You walk on. You are dreaming. There is the sound of water, cool blue, clear. A small stream slicing across the skin of the sun. You lean down to drink, but the water slips away. You lunge after it and slam your head into stone. You open your eyes. It is not water. It is your own drool pooling on the ground. Not river rock. It is a human corpse. His eyes are open, just like yours. But he is not dreaming anymore. You stir. Your skin has rooted into the earth. You try to roll over, and a tear opens at your side. The blood does not pour. It seeps, like liquid from a torn pouch. You can hear it soak into the ground like your body's last whisper. A shadow looms, the crunch of nailed boots, the heavy stench of sweat and rotten leather. A hand grabs your collar, not gently, not to save you. You are yanked upright. No one asks if you are alive. Just one sentence tossed at you like a brick. Can you still walk? You mean to shake your head, but your head is no longer yours. It nods. He pulls you to your feet. In front of you is a stretcher, raw wood, rough rope, and a body under coarse fabric. Heavy, the smell unmistakable. You know that smell. It used to be a person. A soldier points to your hand. No further explanation. You grab the front end of the stretcher, and just like that, you are moving again. Each step sends a jolt down your spine, not because it hurts, but because the corpse has stiffened, grown heavier, more lifeless, and is still considered more important than you. You do not know who he was. A commander, a fellow soldier, someone who died last night, but his body now has more status than yours. You are alive, but you are carrying a name. The stretcher sags. The rope cuts into your hand, slicing through skin thin as onion peel. Your shoulder aches. No, not ache. It has gone numb, but throbs from the bone like needles threading through your marrow. A fly lands on the dead man's lip. You watch. It does not fly off. It feeds. You envy it. At least it is full. The sun is directly overhead now. No shade. No voices. Only the dragging of feet. The creaking of wood. The scrape of coarse fabric against the dirt. You start breathing through your mouth. Not from exhaustion, but because your nose cannot take the stench of decay. Every breath is a swallowed gag. Your stomach is empty, nothing left to throw up. Only the soundless spasms of a body trying to purge itself from itself. At one point you stumble. A soldier behind you yells, "Careful, do not let him fall." Him, meaning the body. You are just the hands carrying it. You laugh. A laugh with no taste, no lips. Just a twitch of the face, like a corpse trying to smile. The column stops at a mound of dirt, not to rest, to bury, no ceremony, no name, just a shallow pit dug in haste, waiting for more flesh. You lower the stretcher. The body is heavy as grief. As you set it down, your shoulder feels like it is being torn from its socket. You look at him one last time. The corpse has a name. You do not. A soldier drags him down, rolls him like a sack of sand. A dull thud. No one flinches. You are handed a cloth, old frayed, stained with dried blood, to wipe your face or the stretcher or to cover your mouth during burial. No one says. You choose, you wipe your forehead and realize there is no more sweat left. You drink a mouthful of water from someone else's pouch. No one looks. Everyone has done it. A soldier sits next to you. You do not know him. He has no name. He offers you a piece of bread. You take it. Bite. A tooth cracks. You do not cry out. No more teeth. Maybe that is a blessing. He looks at you, asks, "Where are you from?" You say nothing, because you do not remember. Or maybe you were never from anywhere at all. You only have the present. And the present is dry sweat-infected cuts, and the sense that every part of you is being used up to the very last second. You are not dead, but you are not alive either. You were chosen for the corpse-carrying team because you are not dead enough to leave behind, and not alive enough to fight. You are no one. Just borrowed muscle for someone who no longer breathes. Another horn. Burial time is over. The order to move. You stand your shoulder screaming like it is broken. But you do not need a shoulder to live. Just the ability to keep walking. You glance back at the grave. Beneath it lies someone who was once called by name. At least once. You look up at the sky. No clouds. No hope. Just a blinding white light. The kind that is not meant to show the way, but to erase any place to hide. You walk on. You used to think nighttime was for sleeping. But after tonight, you will understand darkness is when no one sees you die. The army stopped, just as the last sunlight faded. Not because the march had ended, but because if they kept going, too many would fall without time to be picked up. Everyone scattered, finding spots to sit. No one spoke. No one complained. Complaining belonged to the first days. Now there was only breathing, and even that felt like a luxury. You found a patch of ground soft enough not to tear your feet any further. You sat, the smell of dry mud, urine, and ash. A familiar smell. A smell that reminded you that you still had a nose, and that you were still alive, at least partly. The man next to you fell asleep, eyes still half open. No one bothered to shut their eyes anymore, because dreams and reality were no longer that far apart. You unwrapped your foot, not to rest, but because you could no longer stand the smell. The foot was purple, cracked, and something was crawling out from under the nail. You did not scream. You just watched it crawl away. Maybe it was looking for a way out, just like you. The night wind began to blow. Not cold, just enough for you to hear dry skin scrape against dry skin. You wondered how long it had been since you last heard laughter. Not the kind that comes from madness, but real laughter. Night fell completely. No stars. Just a thick black soaking in like blood through fabric. Someone moaned. Another clattered their teeth. There were whispers, some prayers, some curses, some no longer in any human language. You do not know if you ever fell asleep. You just remember the moment, the first sound that did not belong to anything you had ever known. It was not loud, not sharp, not sudden. It was smooth, like a blade sliding out of flesh. Then silence. No one screamed, not yet. Then the second sound came, the wet thunk of a knife sinking into a neck or a belly or someplace soft. You did not see because your eyes were nothing but two lumps of black coal. Then came a hiss, very close, a breath thick with the stink of raw meat and blood. Then something dropped to the ground, heavy like a water sack. Could be a person, could be you. But you had not fallen, not yet. You heard someone scream, a dry, broken scream like it had been strangled halfway out. That scream did not rise to the sky. It sank into the dirt. You did not run, not because you were brave, but because you no longer believed there was anywhere to run to. You grabbed your dull knife. Its edge chipped, its handle rotting. Your hand shook, but not from fear, from cold. For the first time in days, you felt cold. A shadow slipped past, fast, no shape, just a movement through darkness you could not define. It was not a soldier, not a man, not a thief, just something hungry. You did not know how many had died. Each fall was another crack in the silence. Snoring stopped. Breathing stopped. Names stopped being called. You heard your own name. Someone called it. A voice you knew. Your mother, a friend, you were not sure. But you did not answer. You crawled under a tarp. Thin. Torn. Not enough to cover you, but enough to make you feel like you still had a shape. Under that scrap of fabric, you held your breath. Not because you feared being found, but because you did not want the killer's breath to enter your lungs. Your eyes were wide open. You saw nothing, but your ears, they heard everything. Every step, every breath, every blade being drawn, every claw scraping the sand. You do not know how long you were under there. Could have been minutes. Could have been part of a collective breakdown. But then suddenly, silence. No more footsteps. No more snoring. No more anything. Just emptiness like the palm of your hand. The same one that once held a sword, now slick with cold sweat. You lifted the tarp. The night was still dark, but not like before. It was not the black of shadows. It was the black of something that had eaten everything and left you behind. You stepped out. Your foot touched something wet. No need to look. Blood. Someone's you did not know. Might have been yours from earlier. A body lay face down, hands severed, head twisted, mouth open, like trying to scream but too late, eyes still open, with no pupils. You bent down, covered his eyes with a piece of cloth. Not for him, but because you could not bear to be stared at by a corpse asking, "Why are you still alive?" Footsteps in the distance, the guard patrol arrived. They did not ask what had happened. They only counted the bodies. You were ordered back into formation, as if everything was still going according to plan. You asked nothing. You simply turned and walked. No one asked what you had seen. No one told what had happened. Only the screams, faded, cracked, unheard. You walked. You wake up because something hard is in your mouth. Not a rock, not wood. A finger. Someone's finger. In your sleep, you had rolled over next to a corpse. You had been clenching his hand in your teeth. You spit it out. You gag. The metallic taste clings to your tongue. You do not feel nauseous anymore. You have lost all sensation from the throat down. You sit up. Your eyes burn. Not from smoke. This morning's air is terrifyingly clear, as if the massacre last night never happened. You look around, bodies scattered, some face down, some missing their lower halves. One looks like it was dragged off during the night, leaving behind a long streak like a snake made of blood. No one is cleaning up. No one is calling names. A soldier is combing his hair. Watching him, you feel like you are witnessing an act so absurdly human, it feels cruel. You are not sure if he has lost his mind, or if you are the crazy one thinking that combing hair is the most disturbing thing you have seen this morning. You stand. Your left leg shakes. Your right leg has been numb since last night. You nudge a rock to test it. Nothing. That leg may already be dead. The rest of you just has not caught up yet. You pass a body. Bruised face, broken teeth, one ear sliced off. Eyes still open. You think about closing them, but your hands are no longer delicate enough for small gestures like that. You only know how to kill, to carry, or to walk. Everything else has fallen away along the road. A commander gives the order to march. No one asks where to. That question went extinct last week. You fall in with the group. Those who remain, how many you do not know. The living mixed with the half-dead. They no longer look at one another. There is nothing left to say. You are handed a ration, a lump of something soft, like clay, with no smell, no taste, no shape. You do not ask what it is. You just swallow. Your throat scrapes as you force it down. A piece sticks in your esophagus. You dig it out. A tooth comes with it. Not your tooth. Doesn't matter. Someone calls your name. But you do not turn. Not from pride, but because you are not sure that name still belongs to you. You used to be a person. You had a last name, a hometown, a story to tell. Now you are just a pair of legs that follows orders, a back for carrying corpses, a mouth to eat unnameable things. You catch sight of Alexander in the distance. He is on a horse, clean, bright-eyed, his face unreadable. You once thought he was the light. Now he is just something too far to reach but close enough to keep chasing. Like a mirage. The army moves again, like the walking dead. No chants, no music. Just wind rocks grinding beneath worn souls and the whispers of those who still have a shred of humanity left. You drag your legs. Each step no longer hurts. It is just emptiness. You are not hoping to arrive. You do not even know what arrive means anymore. You think about last night and realize you cannot remember who you killed or who you saw die. Every memory has bled into a single muddy brown. Blood, dirt, ash, and tears that never fell. A young soldier walks beside you. He wheezes. Every step is a sob. You look at him. He looks back. then turns away. No greetings, no good lucks, because everyone knows you could march together for 10 days and then trample over each other in a mass grave on the 11th. By noon, you see a corpse impaled on a stake, unrecognizable. Maybe a prisoner, maybe a deserter. No face left, just a small wooden sign around its neck. Keep going. You do not know if it is an order or a joke. The sun reaches its peak. The wind dies. The earth holds its breath. And you realize the only thing still moving in this world is you. And that is the most terrifying thing of all. You walk. You do not know where to. You do not believe in anyone. You have no reason to live, but also no reason to die. You do not remember your name, but you still have legs. You do not know what day it is, but you are still breathing. You do not know who you are, but you are still moving. And for Alexander, that is enough.